So I took the dimensioning of the Ark of the Covenant as given in the Bible. It's quite precise. And I got the dimensioning of the inside of the sarcophagus in the Grand Pyramid of Giza. And it was a perfect match. That is, if you have the Ark of the Covenant built, you will be able to lower that box into the sarcophagus of the Grand Pyramid at Giza, okay? And it will fit perfectly on the side and perfectly on the length so that you can lower it with the poles and push the poles in, which are telescopic on the Ark. And then I realized that the inside volume inside the sarcophagus is exactly half of the outside volume of that sarcophagus. Exactly, I mean, very highly precisely. And if you take the dimensions of the Ark, then you get exactly half the volume of the inside of the sarcophagus. And then if you take the dimension of the inside of the Ark, you get exactly half of the outside dimensions of the Ark. So you get perfect octaves of cavity, or resonance cavity, inside the sarcophagus. So I started to think, maybe this object is not an Hebrew object. Maybe this object actually got taken out of Egypt by Moses when he left with the Israelites. And that might be a reason why after the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt, allowed Moses to leave, all of a sudden realized that he was taking off with the power source and changed his mind and went after him. All right, that's very interesting. I'm starting to have a better picture of what's going on. I'm extrapolating, and I got some supporting evidence later. We'll see it, but I started to study ancient Egyptian texts to see if there was any evidence of that. And I found plenty, but one thing that struck me is that there's a story about a king of Egypt, a pharaoh, that's on a lake with his wife, and she loses a very precious, beautiful bracelet in the lake. And the pharaoh and the wife is quite distraught, and the pharaoh really wants to do something about it. And so the story goes to say that they call the high priest of Egypt, and they come and they open the waters of the lake to find the bracelet and give it back to the queen. And I thought, sounds like these guys, hundreds of years before Moses, were doing things similar to open the Red Sea. Now, imagine that you had the power of gravitation under your control. You could do things like stopping the course of water, okay, and opening channels. You could push things around. So I started to think about it, but when I read Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea, I saw no evidence. It just says that Moses went to the front of the sea, raised his staff, opened his arm, and the thing opened, right? So I'm like, wow, that's some serious stuff you got going. And then I came across something that was much more descriptive. And that's typically lost by the scholars. In this chapter, it's called Joshua. In Joshua is much later after Moses. They've gone through the desert. Moses is now gone, is dead. And Joshua is in charge of the Israelites. And they arrive upon the Jordan, which is a large river, especially when it's running at flood level. And they mention in here that it is running at flood level. And they need to cross the river. And they don't know how to do it. At the time, there was no bridges. And so they are in a conundrum, and Joshua is instructed to take the ark and put all the high priests on the ark and then walk the ark into the Jordan. It's got the parting of the Jordan. And in this case, it's quite descriptive. It's quite amazing. It says, and the priests came out of the river carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. No sooner they had set their feet on dry ground than the water of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. So here, it's quite very, very direct about using the ark to actually stop the course of the water of the Jordan, let the tribes of Israel go through, and then as soon as they got out of there, the gravitational field, or whatever you want to call it, allowed the water to start running again. One thing that's really omitted is the paragraph right after, or shortly after, paragraph 23. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. Remember, the Lord is the tetragrammaton described as the Ark of the Covenant. The Lord your God did to the Jordan just what it had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. In this paragraph, very specifically, it says that the reason the Red Sea was crossed and opened up is because it was the Ark of the Covenant that was used to do it. The reason why this is typically omitted is because all scholars believe that the Ark box was built after the crossing of the Red Sea at the foot of Mount Sinai. But the source power of that Ark box might have come right out of Egypt. And that might have been the power source of a technology much more advanced than anything we can dream of today. All right, so now I was able to place that the ark had been used to open the Red Sea and then open the Jordan, and then later it's used to make the walls of Jericho fall, and then eventually is placed in the Temple of Solomon in the Holy of Holies, and is actually the center worship of all of these Israelites. Today, the rock on which the ark used to be in the middle of the Temple of Solomon is under the dome of the rock in Jerusalem, which is controlled by Islamic tradition. So the Islamic tradition actually are controlling and consider that place a very holy place, because it said that that Muhammad ascended from that central place in the Temple of Solomon. So now you've got Islamic tradition and Hebraic tradition crossing over at the Ark of the Covenant. And these people have been fighting for so long. And so I continued to study, and something opened up. There's a whole set of information that opened up that we are not going to be able to go through tonight. We're going to go through some, but that leads from the Egyptian to the Hebrews, to the Muslim, to the Templars, to the Middle Age, to modern age, to America, and right to the $1 bill. And that set of knowledge has been leading and powering our governments for a very long time. I think there is much more to what's going on that has to do with the search for this power. eventually I came across these things. They're called the copper scrolls. Again, Edgar Cayce, interestingly, in one of his esoteric reading, mentioned that scholars were going to find in the 70s, or I can't remember when, scrolls from a hidden society along the Dead Sea.